Chapter 11. When you're sitting outside Mr. Klondike's office, the first thing you see is a giant poster of a kitten sitting in a bathtub filled with milk. The slogan reads, "Sometimes enough is enough." I waited there for a few minutes, staring at the kitten until his assistant, Mrs. Crowley, said, You can go ahead in, hon." "Thank you, Mrs. Crowley," I said extra politely, since I was pretty sure Mr. Klondike could hear me. I walked into his office, but Mr. Klondike was busy writing something, and he didn't look up. "Jimmy," he said, "how very nice to see you as always. Take a seat." I did as I was told, then waited for about 3 minutes as Mr. Klondike finished what he was doing. Fact: when you're sitting in the vice principal's office, 3 minutes feels like 333 minutes. Finally, he lifted his head. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" "Clarice and I bumped into each other and the lasagna spilled," I mumbled. "I see." Mr. Klondike put his pen down. "That sounds like an unfortunate accident, but from what I understand, you then decided to blame everyone except yourself, including Clarice, who may be the most beloved employee at the entire school." The way he described it, it sounded like I'd acted like a total jerk. Which was the moment I realized that I had acted like a total jerk. It was. Mr. Klondike waved his hand at me. "I'm not interested in your explanation, only your apology, which you should offer to all of those involved." I hung my head. "I will." "Good, then that's settled." I waited for Mr. Klondike to either punish or dismiss me, but instead he got up and looked out his window for a second. Then he turned around and sat down in the chair next to me. "Jimmy, I've known you for a while now, and I've always thought of you as one of our most mature students." "You're the only one," I thought to myself. "This kind of behavior seems completely out of character for you," Mr. Klondike went on. "So maybe you can tell me what this is really about. Is there something else going on?" "No," I said, without thinking about it. "Everything's fine." "Okay then, you can go." I stared up at him. "Really? I'm not in trouble?" "No, you're not in trouble, as long as you make sure to apologize." "I will, I promise." I grabbed my backpack, leaped up, and headed to the door. But then I stopped and turned back. At first, I wasn't even sure why. "Mr. Klondike?" I asked. He was already writing again, but he stopped and looked up. "Yes, Jimmy?" I took a breath. You know how sometimes you can really believe something, and you've believed in it for a long time, even though it's usually something that maybe only a little kid would believe in? You mean kind of, I guess, yeah. I took another step back into his office. The thing is, everyone thinks you're crazy for believing it, but still deep down, you're convinced it's true, you know? Until one day you realize that maybe all those people might have been right all along, and you were wrong. Has that ever happened to you? I'm not sure that it has, Jimmy, but I can imagine that it's not a great feeling. Yeah, it's not. Do you want to tell me what it is that you're talking about? I thought for a second and then shook my head. Not right now, if it's okay. Maybe someday, though. Mr. Klondike took his glasses off for a second and rubbed his eyes. "The only thing I can tell you, Jimmy, is you need to give yourself every chance to prove that you are right. Do your homework, do your research, and I promise you will be satisfied. Possibly not with what you discover, but with the fact that you did everything possible to know the truth, one way or the other. That's why knowledge is so important in this world." "Thank you, Mr. Klondike. I will." "Please say hello to Abby for me," he said. For a second, I thought he knew exactly what I was talking about, but then I realized he was just being friendly. Fact: having a nice vice principal is something that takes getting used to.